ever like kind of stuck on autopilot? You know, like just going through the motions, almost like there's this whole other level, like a deeper level of fulfillment you could be tapping into,
Mm.
but just can't quite seem to reach it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you're definitely not alone if you feel that way.
Right.
We're diving deep into this conversation today between, let's see, it was Tom Bilyeu and the author Robert Greene.
Okay.
And he's got some really, really eye-opening thoughts on this kind of feeling, this kind of stuck feeling.
Yeah, what I find intriguing is how Greene really kind of pinpoints this lack of self-awareness as like the root cause of this widespread, like almost boredom that people feel.
Right.
Like we're constantly chasing these quick fixes, external validation, instead of actually like taking a step back and being like, what's the root cause of why something feels off?
Yeah, and he doesn't really sugarcoat it either. Like, he kind of calls us out, doesn't he?
Mm.
He says that a lot of us are just kind of living out of sync with who we really are. And then we end up making all these choices that don't really resonate with our, like, our true selves because we haven't even taken the time to figure out what those even are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we're all given like these generic maps for life
Right.
instead of being given the tools and being shown how to actually chart our own course, you know? So it's like when that path that we're on doesn't actually lead to the destination that we deeply crave,
Yes.
no wonder there's that sense of emptiness.
Now, Greene believes that unlocking that self-awareness, this is where it gets kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Because it takes serious, like, guts.
Yeah.
It's not just about affirmations and, just good vibes only. This is about confronting those, those less than flattering parts of ourselves, the insecurities that we so often, just project onto other people.
No, 100%. And he doesn't even, like, he's not saying to get obsessed with every little flaw that we have. It's more about recognizing that our emotions, especially the negative ones, often they stem from a much deeper place than we realize. Like that anger that you feel, right? That could be masking some deeper insecurity that you're kind of avoiding dealing with.
He uses the example of getting into arguments, like with his wife, and he's saying that he would get defensive and angry, but then later on, he kind of realized it was just because his own insecurities were being poked at.
Totally. And it's such a good example of how self-awareness is not just this abstract concept.
Right.
It has real-world implications on how we're navigating relationships, challenges, just everything.
But here's where I feel like Greene throws a little bit of a curveball.
Okay.
He goes on to discuss this concept of power.
Okay.
And by power, I don't mean like, evil villain, like, kind of power.
Right.
He believes that it's a fundamental human drive that we all have. It's often just disguised as something a bit nobler.
Exactly. And he challenges us to kind of rethink that knee-jerk negative reaction that we have when we hear that word. Yes.
It's not about, being controlling or having power over other people. It's about expanding your own personal influence,
right.
your options in your own life.
Like that feeling of being stuck in a rut versus the exhilaration of like breaking free.
Yes.
And choosing your own adventure, right?
Exactly.
And what Greene argues is that denying our desire for that kind of power can actually be more harmful because it leads to things like resentment and passive aggressiveness.
Right, because it's going to come out one way or another.
Exactly.
So instead of trying to push it away, what he suggests is that we acknowledge it and find healthy ways to channel it constructively.
Right.
And that's where he brings in this idea of mastery, right?
Okay.
Which is finding something, anything that you are passionate about, and becoming incredibly skilled, like mastering that thing.
And when he says anything, he means it.
Yeah.
This could be entrepreneurship, this could be coding, it could be creative writing, it could even be mastering a sport or a musical instrument. It's about finding your niche, whatever that looks like for you. So absolutely.
And then owning it.
And what I think is so cool about that is it's not about chasing prestige or external validation.
Right.
It's about that deep satisfaction of pushing your own boundaries.
Yeah.
Mastering a skill that's both that benefits you, but then also benefits other people.
He challenges this idea that this whole find your passion thing, that it's just like an elitist thing.
Yeah.
He believes that everyone, it doesn't matter your background, has the capacity for this type of mastery. It's about tapping into that innate drive to learn, to grow, and to create.
100%. It's about finding that sweet spot where your skills and your interests perfectly intersect with a genuine need in the world.
I love that.
Right. And it might be something really small, like you become the go-to person at work for a very, very specific task.
Yeah.
Or it could be something massive, like you build an entire business around a skill that you're super passionate about.
Now get this, Greene. He also tackles another belief that a lot of us just accept as like gospel.
Mm.
And that is that stress is automatically a bad thing.
Yeah.
He actually talks about ancient rituals that use stress intentionally to achieve altered states.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
Like we've been conditioned to believe that all stress is bad stress.
Right.
When in reality, we can actually learn how to leverage it. Think about that adrenaline rush that we get, like when
Yeah.
you're laser focused on a deadline.
Right.
That's stress working for you.
Yes.
It's not working against you.
He even uses Thomas Edison as an example. Thomas Edison apparently thrived under pressure, and he would actually publicly announce these invention deadlines
Oh, wow.
just to create this extra sense of urgency, which in turn fueled his creative process.
It's so interesting.
Who knew stress could be so useful?
Right. It all comes down to reframing how we view it. So instead of looking at stress as something to avoid at all costs, what if we started to view it as a sign that we're actually pushing ourselves,
Okay, yeah.
that we're growing, that we're stepping outside of our comfort zone?
Now, this is where I feel like things get really interesting in this conversation. Greene and Bill Yu start discussing this concept called negative capability.
Okay.
And it's this ability to be able to hold what seems like contradictory ideas in our mind at the same time without needing to immediately resolve the tension.
I see. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when you're working on something creative, like a project, and you just hit a wall.
Right.
And instead of just like panicking and being like, I need to force a solution right now, you just sit with that discomfort.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I know if I just like keep going at it, the breakthrough is going to come when I least expect it.
Yes, exactly. It's that feeling of being comfortable with the unknown,
Yeah.
of embracing that ambiguity, and just trusting that the answers will kind of reveal themselves when they're ready.
Exactly. And he uses a great example. He talks about Louis Pasteur.
Okay.
And you know how Louis Pasteur discovered vaccines?
Right.
And that totally revolutionized medicine, right? Well, his discovery actually came about because he was willing to entertain this idea that seemed completely absurd at the time,
Oh.
that weakened bacteria could actually make chickens immune to a stronger strain.
Interesting.
Which, like, if you think about it, completely contradicted the prevailing scientific beliefs of the time.
Right.
But his ability to, like, hold that tension, to be like, you know what, I'm going to embrace this uncertainty.
Right.
It allowed him to make one of the most significant medical breakthroughs, in history.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And that's the power of negative capability, right?
Yeah.
It allows us to see possibilities in places where other people are just seeing dead ends.
Yes.
And it challenges us to, challenge our assumptions and to be able to embrace new perspectives.
So it's about being open to potentially even being wrong,
Yes.
being open to changing our minds when we're presented with new information.
Mm,
And constantly seeking out those diverse perspectives.
100%. Like understanding that we don't have all the answers, and that's fine. And that we should actually be open to learning from other people, even if their views are totally different from ours.
And that actually brings us to another point that I think is super crucial.
Okay.
And it's this idea of having mentors in our lives
Yeah.
and surrounding ourselves with people who are going to challenge us to grow.
Absolutely. And I love what he says about mentors. He says that they're not there to agree with us all the time, right?
Right.
They're there to offer guidance. They're there to support us. And sometimes, honestly, they're there to give us a much needed dose of reality.
That's a good point.
Because sometimes we need that,
We definitely do. Yeah. They can act as sounding boards for our ideas, sources of inspiration. Sometimes they can even connect us to new opportunities that we didn't even know existed.
100%. And the beauty of it is that mentors, they can come from all walks of life. Like it could be a former professor, a colleague that you really respect,
Oh,
a
yeah.
friend, even someone you've never even met, but whose work you admire.
Greene actually encourages us to be very proactive in seeking out those mentors in our lives,
Yes.
to be open to learning from their experiences, and to never be afraid to ask for help when we need it.
100%. And I love how he also emphasizes that mentorship isn't this one-sided thing.
Right.
Like we should also strive to be mentors to others,
Yes.
to share our knowledge and experiences and just contribute to creating this like culture of learning and growth.
It's about recognizing that we all have something really valuable to offer,
Yes.
and that this journey of, self-mastery, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
is always best traveled together.
100%. It's about understanding that true success, it's not just about our own individual achievements, right?
Nice.
It's also about how we lift other people up and contribute to something much, much larger than ourselves.
And this brings us to another really important point that Greene makes. It's this idea of embracing failure as just, it's an inevitable part of the learning process.
Yeah, you're going to fail, you know?
You have to.
It's going to happen.
And he argues that failure isn't the opposite of success, which is what a lot of us think. It's a stepping stone.
Right. It's part of the journey.
It's part of the journey. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a stepping stone on the path to mastery.
Totally. It's interesting how this whole conversation about failure kind of ties into another topic that Greene goes into, which is resilience.
It's like, that saying, you fall down 7 times, you got to get up 8. Like, it's not about never failing.
Right.
It's about how you bounce back from it. That's what really matters.
Exactly. And Greene, he argues that resilience is it's almost crucial for navigating all those inevitable setbacks that we're all going to encounter on this path to mastery.
For sure.
And it's about viewing those setbacks not as defeats, not as signs that we should just give up, but as opportunities for learning and growth.
So instead of getting stuck in that cycle of self-doubt after every failure, it's about asking ourselves, okay, what can I learn from this experience? How can I actually use this to grow?
Exactly. And now you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how does this actually connect to happiness?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, no one wants to sign up for a life that's just constant struggle and stress.
Right, exactly. And thankfully, Greene doesn't advocate for that at all.
Right.
In fact, I think he makes a really strong case that embracing those challenges and really pursuing that path to mastery, that it's essential for actually experiencing true happiness.
Yeah, or maybe even a deeper sense of fulfillment.
Yes.
Because think about it. When was the last time that you actually accomplished something really, really challenging?
Yeah.
Something that pushed you outside of your comfort zone? Didn't that sense of accomplishment feel incredible?
Yeah, it really did. It's like that. It's almost like a runner's high,
Yes.
Like after a really tough workout where you're exhausted, but you also feel super exhilarated.
Yes.
You're proud of yourself for pushing past those mental and physical barriers.
Exactly. And that feeling, right?
Yeah.
That sense of accomplishment, the satisfaction, that's really what Greene is getting at.
Yeah.
He's saying that true happiness and fulfillment, it doesn't come from comfort and ease. It comes from growth.
Yeah.
It comes from expanding our capabilities.
Pushing our boundaries.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And from knowing that we are contributing something truly meaningful to the world around us.
So it's not about seeking out pleasure and avoiding pain at all costs.
Right.
It's about actually finding a way to find joy in that process of growing and mastering something.
Yes.
Even if that means we're going to encounter challenges and setbacks along the way.
Absolutely. And that's where he talks about this concept of flow. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's that state of being completely absorbed in something.
Yes.
Where you actually lose track of time because you're so engaged in what you're doing.
Oh, I love that feeling. It's like when you're so engrossed in a project or a hobby.
Yes.
And the rest of the world just kind of fades away.
Yeah.
You're totally present. You're completely in the moment, and it just feels incredible.
Exactly. And what's so cool? Greene, he says that this state of flow, a lot of times it's associated with activities that challenge us.
Okay.
That require us to really stretch ourselves and to use our skills to the absolute fullest.
So it's not necessarily about finding work that's easy or stress-free.
Yeah.
It's more about finding that work that's going to fully engage us.
Yes.
That lets us tap into those passions and actually use our strengths in a way that makes a difference.
Absolutely. It's about that intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
It's about that fire that burns within you.
Yes.
And it's so essential, he says, for long-term fulfillment.
It's not about external validation like the money or the recognition, although those are nice perks.
Right. Exactly.
But it's really about the deep satisfaction that comes from doing something that you find truly meaningful.
Yes.
And engaging on the deep level.
And he actually encourages us to think back to when we were kids. Think back to those activities that you were just naturally drawn to.
Yeah.
The things that you loved doing, even if they didn't seem practical or prestigious.
Right.
What were you super passionate about as a kid?
Oh, that's so easy. I was obsessed with building stuff.
Okay.
Like Lego blocks, tree houses.
Yeah.
Anything that I could get my hands on. I loved that challenge of taking something from my imagination and then making it real.
There you go. That passion for creating, for building, that's not gone.
Yeah.
That's still a part of you. That's something that you can still tap into even now,
Yeah.
regardless of where you are in your career path. Like, that's still a part of you.
And it doesn't have to be this like massive career overhaul, you
Right,
know.
yeah.
It could be as simple as just trying to find ways to be more creative, creative problem solving
Yes.
in my current role.
Right.
Or maybe finding a side hustle or something that lets me build and create, and tap into that.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to align our work and our lives with our natural inclinations, with our passions.
Yes, I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Totally possible.
So even if we're not in our dream job at this exact moment, there are still steps we can take,
Yeah.
to inject a little bit more meaning, a little bit more purpose into our days.
Yes.
We can explore those passions that maybe have been dormant for a while.
Yes.
We can rediscover those childhood joys, those things that lit us up,
Yeah.
and find a way to bring more of who we really are into our work.
100%. And sometimes
Funny.
that might involve making some bigger changes,
Right.
And Greene, he acknowledges that. He's like, look, sometimes the path to fulfillment, it requires us to take a chance.
Right.
We have to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone
For sure.
and pursue those dreams.
Yeah.
Even if it means, challenging societal expectations a little bit.
He reminds us that true fulfillment often lies on that path, less traveled.
Yes.
That one that requires you to be a little bit bold.
Yes.
To really embrace that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And trust that you have what it takes to figure it out.
And you know what comes along with that?
What's that?
Discipline.
Okay.
And perseverance.
Okay.
Like, he doesn't sugarcoat this at all. He's
Yeah.
like, look, if you want to achieve mastery in any field,
Yeah.
it requires dedication,
Yeah.
consistent effort, and a willingness to persevere even when things get tough.
He's not peddling some get-rich-quick scheme or some overnight success formula.
Yeah. No.
This is about actually putting in the work day after day,
Yes.
even when you don't feel like it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where having a system, like some kind of structure, can be so incredibly helpful.
Okay.
He talks about breaking down those large, overwhelming goals that we have into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
And then also just the importance of tracking our progress,
Okay. Yeah.
no matter how small
Yeah.
it might seem.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Exactly.
And we need to celebrate those small wins along the way because that's what's going to keep us going.
100%. It keeps us motivated. It keeps us on track.
Yeah.
And something else he talks about is the importance of having that supportive community around us,
Yeah.
whether that's mentors, peers, friends, family,
Yeah.
The people who really believe in us, who are going to encourage us to keep going, even when we start to doubt ourselves a little bit.
It's so key.
Yes. The people who are going to be there to celebrate our successes alongside of us.
Yeah, having that kind of support system can make such a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when we're in those moments, where we're facing those challenges, where we're
Yeah.
just feeling a little discouraged.
For sure.
And it's just as important as having that support system.
Yeah.
Self-care.
Oh, okay.
Like, mastery isn't about pushing ourselves to the point of burnout, right?
Right.
It's about finding that sustainable pace.
It's about recognizing that taking that time for ourselves, for rest, for rejuvenation.
Yes.
It's not being selfish. It's not being lazy.
No.
They're actually essential components if we want long-term growth, long-term success.
Yes. It's like when you're training for a marathon, you wouldn't just go out there and try to run 26 miles with no rest, no recovery.
Right.
You can't. It's impossible.
You would hurt yourself.
Yeah, you'd get injured right away.
Exactly.
And the same principle applies to any other area in our life where we're trying to achieve some level of mastery.
It's about playing the long game,
Yes.
not the short game.
Yes, exactly.
It's about putting our physical health, our mental well-being
Yeah.
first.
100%.
Because
Okay.
that's how we're going to be able to continue to show up as our best selves,
Exactly.
both in our work and in our personal lives.
And what's really cool?
What's that?
It's like this idea of self-care. It ties into another really important point that Greene makes. He says that mastery, it's not this selfish pursuit at all.
Right.
It's not just about us achieving personal fulfillment.
No.
It's about taking all those skills, all those talents that we're developing,
Yes.
and using them to actually make a positive impact on the world around us.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
So when we're out there trying to become the best versions of ourselves, it inspires other people to do the same thing.
Yes.
And that collective effort, that can lead to incredible positive change.
Exactly. And I love how he reminds us that we all have these unique gifts and talents that we can offer the world.
Yes.
And by really leaning into those gifts and striving for that mastery,
Yeah.
we can actually create a legacy that extends far beyond just ourselves,
I love that.
you know?
Oh, it's really cool.
So we've talked about, like, the importance of discipline, perseverance, all that good stuff.
Right.
But let's be real. There's this one major obstacle that tends to trip a lot of us up, and that is procrastination.
Ugh. Yes. Procrastination. That sneaky saboteur of dreams.
Right. The productivity killer.
Yes, exactly.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Greene, he doesn't just see it as laziness or, just poor time management.
There's something deeper there.
Totally. He's like, procrastination often comes from a place of fear.
Okay.
Fear of failure, that's a big one, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
We put things off because we're terrified of not being good enough, of being judged or disappointing ourselves or other people.
It's easier to just avoid something altogether than to risk failing.
Exactly. But here's the thing that I thought was so interesting.
Okay.
He also points out that we can procrastinate out of a fear of success.
Now that sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Right.
Like, why would anybody be afraid of succeeding?
Right. It might seem strange on the surface, but think about it.
Okay.
Success, a lot of times, comes with increased responsibility.
Okay.
Higher expectations from ourselves and from other people. And sometimes, even just a fear of the unknown, like, okay, well, what happens once I actually achieve this thing that I've been working toward?
Right, right.
Like, will I be able to handle it? Am I going to change? Will people still like me? All these weird things.
So it's like this weird catch-22 where we procrastinate because we're afraid to fail, but then we also might be procrastinating because we're afraid of what success might actually bring into our lives.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
But don't worry, he doesn't just leave us hanging with this, like, procrastination analysis paralysis.
Okay, good.
He actually gives us some really, really tactical strategies that we can use for overcoming this.
Okay, I'm ready. Give me the strategies.
Okay, one of his biggest pieces of advice is you got to break those large, super overwhelming tasks down into smaller, much more manageable steps.
Okay.
Because then you don't feel so overwhelmed when you look at it.
It's amazing how much less intimidating things seem when you're not staring down like this massive mountain in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, instead of focusing on the whole entire mountain, just focus on the first step that's right in front of you.
I love that.
Right. Another strategy that he recommends is to really start paying attention to that negative self-talk that we all have. Those voices in our head
Oh, tell me about
that
it.
are constantly whispering.
Yes. Those voices, they can be brutal.
Right. They say things like, you're not good enough, or you're going to fail, or what are you even doing?
They're the worst.
But we don't have to let those voices run the show. Like, we have a choice, right?
Right.
And he encourages us to question those voices, to challenge them, to ask ourselves, is this really true?
Right.
And then to start replacing those thoughts with more empowering beliefs.
So it's like we can retrain our brains to focus on what's possible instead of just dwelling on all the doubts.
Exactly. Like, you can literally change your life by changing your thoughts.
Wow, I love that.
And another powerful strategy that he talks about is connecting that task, that thing that you've been putting off. Yes.
To something you're actually passionate about, or
Yeah.
to like a greater purpose.
Okay.
You know-
So if I can find a way to make the task like even a little bit enjoyable, or if it feels meaningful, then I'm less likely to put it off.
Yes. It's about tapping into that intrinsic motivation, that fire that burns within you.
Yes.
That pushes you to keep going even when it's hard.
I love that. And this actually ties into another really important concept that Greene explores in his work, and that's legacy.
Oh, yes, legacy. I love that.
That idea of leaving something meaningful behind in the world,
Yes, exactly. He says that we all have this potential to leave a legacy, to make a difference that outlasts us.
Right.
But it's not something that just magically happens.
Right. You got to put in the work.
It takes effort. It takes that willingness to contribute something truly valuable to the world.
It's not just about chasing fame and fortune, right?
No, not at all.
It's got to be something deeper than that.
Yes. He says that true legacy is about making a difference in other people's lives.
About creating something that will continue to exist and make an impact even after we're gone.
It's about leaving the world a little bit brighter than we found it, right?
Yes. And you know what's so cool about all this? He says that creating a meaningful legacy, it starts with self-awareness.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Because if you want to create a legacy that truly reflects who you are and what you value,
Right.
you have to have a really, really clear understanding of your strengths, your passions, and your values.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like, what are you uniquely qualified to offer the world? What do you care about most deeply in your heart?
And then it's about making sure that your actions are aligned with those things. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Using your talents to actually make that different.
He actually encourages us to ask ourselves these questions. What kind of impact do I want to have on the world? What do I want to be remembered for?
Those are big questions.
They are big questions,
Yes.
but they're important.
They are, yeah.
And he believes that by asking ourselves these questions, by consciously thinking about our legacy,
Yeah.
we're more likely to make those choices that are truly in alignment with our values, and that will lead us to that more fulfilling and impactful life.
It's like we're writing the story of our lives.
Yeah.
Not just for ourselves,
Yes.
but for future generations as well.
Exactly. And the really cool part is we get to choose how that story unfolds.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been such an incredible deep dive.
I agree.
It's given me so much to think about.
Yeah, me too.
So many actionable takeaways
Yes.
that I can start applying to my own life, like today.
I agree. Greene's work is such a good reminder that we have way more power than we realize to shape our own destinies
Yes.
and to create those legacies that extend like way beyond ourselves.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive today, the question I want to leave everyone with is this. What's one small step that you can take today
Yes.
to move a little bit closer to that life that you really want to create for yourself?
Exactly. What action can you take, no matter how small it might seem,
Right.
to start turning those dreams that you have, those visions, into a reality?
Because at the end of the day, we all have the power within us
We do.
to create that fulfilling and impactful life that we're searching for.
Absolutely.
We really do.
We